All right, hello everybody. Good afternoon. This is the latest edition of Let's Play Chrono Trigger, an ongoing playthrough of my favorite game ever, Chrono Trigger, which I've written about a lot. If you follow me on Twitter, you follow my newsletter, Astrolabe, or any of my other games writing that I've done for places like Kotaku or Input Magazine online, you'll know I'm a huge fan of Japanese RPGs, and so much of my love for that genre goes back to this game, Chrono Trigger. So much so that last year I wrote a fairly extensive history of Chrono Trigger. It's available on Medium to read. It's called Timeless: A History of Chrono Trigger, and it tells the story of this game and the people who made it. It's sort of part history and part also like personal reflection on the genre and what Chrono Trigger means to me, how it's influenced a new generation of Japanese RPG game creators and fans. And I think if you're a Chrono Trigger fan already, or you're just curious about the game, you'll find a lot there to enjoy. And I'm going to cut kind of right to the chase this episode. We are about, I would say, a little over a third of the way through the game. For those who have played it before, we just recently finished Magus's castle. So we fought the Dark Mage who was waging war in 600 AD against the human kingdom. We defeated him and found out he was trying to summon Lavos, which is like a parasite from space that's like eating up all the DNA on the planet. And in doing so, we got pulled into a time gate that has now deposited us way back into 65 million BC, which we've been to before, but now we arrived there to find out that the Reptiles, which are like a sentient dinosaur, an intelligent sentient dinosaur species, has raised one of the human settlements, and so we're teaming up with one of the locals named Isla to go and confront their leader. So here we go. We're at the Tyranno Lair. And if you haven't been watching the stream or the series already, I'm doing a New Game Plus playthrough of Chrono Trigger using like maxed out characters, so I can kind of blaze through all of these battles really quickly. A New Game Plus playthrough usually takes me about 9, 10, 11 hours, depending on how fast I want to play through it, which is by no means, like a speed run, but it is pretty quick. And so I anticipate, this run taking around the same amount of time. I do it in about 45-minute chunks on my lunch break every week. So I appreciate everyone who is joining me today or is watching this as a VOD on YouTube, where I archive all the old episodes. You can find those at youtube.com/AidanMoher, AIDANMOHER. If you like my work as well, or you're unfamiliar with my work, you can find out more about it in my newsletter, Astrolabe, aiden.substack.com. It's a free newsletter that comes out pretty regularly, covering retro games, fantasy and science fiction, nerd culture, writing, all the things that I sort of enjoy. Completely free to sign up. I did just launch a paid subscription option as a way to support the newsletter and also build a foundation for kind of further expansion of what Astrolabe will offer. So there's a few different choices there for you, but whatever you choose to do, I appreciate it, and I think you're going to enjoy that newsletter. Hey, afternoon. How are you doing? Thanks for coming back. Okay, so we're just kind of blazing through the Tyranno Lair. This is like a big dinosaur castle where the Reptiles leader Azala rules from. The Reptiles, this is sort of like an inflection point for the Chrono series, such as it is. After we beat this dungeon in about probably 20 minutes, I gotta talk to him, we find out that the Lavos' arrival, which is like a meteor striking the planet, wipes out the Reptiles, and then, the rest of Chrono Trigger's storyline moves forward with humans as a dominant race. Chrono Cross, somewhat infamously, explores what would have happened if the Reptiles survived and had supplanted humans as the sort of dominant race or species on the planet. And they are very kind of naturalistic and tied into the world around them in a way that humans are not. And so it kind of looks at the balance between kind of nature and magic, and then science and the idea of progression. And this is the point in Chrono Trigger where those two timelines sort of diverge. Chrono Cross has got a lot of narrative issues. In a lot of ways, it's like the exact opposite of Chrono Trigger. Chrono Trigger is very like, quick and to the point. Whereas Chrono Cross is like meandering and really deeply philosophical, or like wants to be deep philosophically. It's all weird. It's kind of like if you'd been into Transformers and then the sequel was you're excited for the sequel and it comes out and it's Neon Genesis Evangelion or something like that. Like that's sort of the like dichotomy between the two games. So I know Chrono Trigger fairly well. I've played through it dozens of times, but I as I say on most of these streams, I'm not a speedrunner either. So you're gonna find me, making some mistakes here and there, just like that instance where I accidentally clicked on the wrong box and went back in the dungeon and stuff. But I also, over the past year, during the course of the pandemic, wasn't able to go work, out at coffee shops as much as I wanted to. I work from home normally, and I often take my computer out to coffee shops to work. I can't do that anymore, and I found that one way to kind of fill the silence at home has been to watch game streams. And I've been watching a lot of Japanese RPG speedruns. They're really great. And one of my favorite is Chrono Trigger. There's a speedrunner by the name of Puexel who plays through the game, and he can beat the full game, like a fresh playthrough, in about 5.5 hours or so. It takes me about 9, almost double that to do a New Game Plus playthrough. So, I learn a lot every time I watch Puexel stream. And so I picked up a few little tricks here and there, a few little skips and strategies, but my technique is certainly not something to learn from. This is one of the most random rooms in the game. It has these like little teleport pads, invisible ones that just like teleport you randomly around the room. There's no rhyme or reason to where they are. There's no rhyme or reason to why they work that way, or like why they exist just in that room. Like they don't exist anywhere else in the game. And they're just there to kind of trip you up. And I've never really understood the justification for having them in there, instead of like, some other sort of trap or monster that you kind of have to like strategize to avoid. I actually made it through that room quite quickly, and that was purely by luck. How's everybody doing this afternoon or this morning, depending on if there's anyone out there from Hawaii, or this evening if I have anyone from the other side of the Atlantic. You'll notice that Isla is bright red. It's not from a sunburn. I have her equipped with an accessory that gives her Berserk, so she just automatically uses her physical attack. She has her maxed out weapon, which is the Iron Fists. Is that what they're called? Bronze Fist? Bronze Fist. And so Isla has no traditional weapons in the game, but as she gains levels and reaches certain thresholds, she gets a new type of fist. She starts off with like a regular fist, and that's what you'll use for most of a regular playthrough. But by the time she's max level, she has a bronze fist, which is very strong. Most importantly, however, it does max damage for any critical hit. So 9,999 damage for every critical hit. And is no slouch just on regular attacks as well. Luca is never very strong with her physical attacks, no matter what level she is. But I just like Luca, so she's in my party. Again, by the time you get to this point in the game, in a New Game Plus playthrough, it hardly matters who's in your party, because you're going to melt through all the encounters without any issue. But that's part of the fun. I've played through Chrono Trigger enough on like regular playthroughs that I have pretty much played the majority of the game with every configuration of party. And they're all super viable. There's no real, there's no dud party. Like there might be in other games, but at the same time, there are certainly parties that are stronger than others. You'll notice that I was able to kind of sneak around Nisbil there, clip through his sprite to get around it, but it does not get you out of the battle. He comes after me anyway. There we go. Critical hit right off the bat from Isla, and max damage just took out Nisbil in one hit. Oh yeah, that's awesome. I'm glad that works for you. I'm a bit of an introvert, actually, so getting in front of a camera. Part of the reason I started up this stream is that I spend so much time by myself at home, and even as an introvert, I still was feeling like there was the lack of social engagement outside of like Twitter was starting to have kind of a negative effect on me. And I find that getting online for 45 minutes a week, an hour a week, and talking is really fun, and kind of gives me that feeling as well of like, it's not the same as getting out to a coffee shop, but I'm able to kind of interact with everyone here, and I'm glad that has that same effect on you. I find it exhausting, like by the time I'm done a stream, talking for 45 minutes straight, when like some other days of the week I won't talk for 45 minutes over the course of a whole day. But I find that it gets kind of really invigorating and just socially energizing for me. Feel like I have to keep those tools sharp for hopefully later in the year, when the pandemic is winding down, things are safer, and when we get to start socializing again a bit more. I don't know how people like full-time like pro streamers do it all day, every day, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. Is something else. I'm incredibly impressed by that sort of tenacity. So in the Tyranno Lair, we are fighting a bunch of dinosaurs, and it doesn't really matter on this New Game Plus run through, but they are, of course, weak against lightning, as is often the case in RPGs. So Chrono is very useful in this dungeon. In a regular playthrough, you're going to be using his lightning attack, generally not so much for damage, but because every time you hit one of the dinosaurs with a lightning spell, it reduces their defense. So you reduce their defense a few times with the lightning spell, and then they're weakened, and you're able to take them out with the rest of your party. So we're nearly done with this dungeon, which features one of the kind of coolest boss sprites on the Super Nintendo, I would say, which is the big Tyrannosaur. It's just so big and impressive, and when you kind of line it up against other stuff from this time period, it really stands out. The animation's not like fabulous, so you look at a game like Trials of Mana, which has these huge, like, well animated, articulated boss monsters, like, those are probably tops on the system, but that also never came out in North America. And so like this Tyrannosaur is one of the just biggest, coolest things I saw on the system, and it just really stood out. And just like also the sense of depth that you get, like you can see near the top middle of the screen, that the Tyrannosaurus Rex's tail is like going further back into the castle, and is shadowed by the castle and stuff, and that's cool. Like, Chrono Trigger has all of this like really great bespoke pixel art that that just doesn't exist elsewhere in the game. It's not tile based; it's all like hand drawn. Yeah, this and Final Fantasy VI are the best of the 16-bit era. I'm not going to try to change your mind on that one. Final Fantasy VI was the game that like really got me into Japanese RPGs after writing them off. And then Chrono Trigger, like Final Fantasy VI, I would say is what the game that got me to like Japanese RPGs, and Chrono Trigger is the game that got me to love Japanese RPGs. And I would put them right there at the top of the 16-bit era. I mean, personally, I would put them at the top of just kind of Japanese RPGs in general, along with games like Suikoden 2, Lunar, Silver Star Story Complete, and stuff. But to me, like, Chrono Trigger and Final Fantasy VI kind of took what started on the NES with Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy, and really like just perfected that evolution, that style of Japanese RPG. And then with the PlayStation coming in a couple years later, and Final Fantasy VII sort of like becoming the next evolution of a more like cinematic style Japanese RPG that kind of changed the genre going forward. I think that Final Fantasy VI and Chrono Trigger is sort of a great send-off to the 8-bit and 16-bit era. And funny enough, I feel like we're, over the past few years, we're starting to see more Japanese RPGs that kind of harken back to this style of RPG. Like, even Bravely Default 2 comes out on Friday, and it's a game that really looks back to that 16-bit era, rather than like the evolution of the cinematic RPG that kind of was spawned by the success of Final Fantasy VII. Okay, so we just saw Lavos, which is a big space parasite, crash into the planet. Azala, we've defeated Azala, and she is resigned to her fate, despite the fact that Isla wants to kind of create a bond between the two people. This is the end of the Reptiles, which is like pretty melancholy when you think about the fact that like the genocide of a sentient, intelligent species just occurred. Not entirely at the fault of the humans. Certainly, like Lavos is coming was also a big part of that, but the whole thing is very sad. Chrono Trigger has a lot of humor in it, but it also does melancholy and a dark introspection really well. Did Chrono Cross go too far the other way? Yes, it did. But again, it's Chrono Cross is a whole different story. Okay, so we're done the Tirano Lair, and now we're about to go to my favorite time period, probably a lot of people's favorite time period, which is 12,000 BC, called Antiquity in the DS remake, the Steam version, the mobile versions, and this is a part in kind of human history where, because of Lavos' coming, it ushers in an ice age that lasts apparently 65 million years, or 64 million whatever years, and it's created a huge divide within humanity where the haves, the people who possess magic, have kind of created this utopia in the sky, and the earthbound ones, which are the humans that don't have any magic, are subjugated to living kind of in this hostile frozen environment. And there's a lot of social commentary and in a lot of Japanese RPGs, but I think that Final Fantasy VI and Chrono Trigger, at least on the Super Nintendo, were two of the first ones to really kind of start crafting narratives around the idea of having themes of kind of human themes that are focused on, like, the divide between the haves and the have-nots, or the wealthy and the unwealthy. So much of Final Fantasy VI is about rebellion and taking down an empire that controls its people and subjugates the Espers. And Chrono Trigger is about looking at the people who are kind of subjugated by, like the coming of Lavos, but also how during times of crises, power vacuums exist and are perpetuated. So. Yeah, Ben, I think that's a pretty good read on Chrono Cross. I think the beginning of Chrono Cross is very good. I think that it starts to get really overwrought midway through once they start kind of answering questions, and the questions become really, or the answers become really over the top. And it's just so drastically different in terms of tone and structure and narrative from Chrono Trigger. And Chrono Cross is just a whole bag of worms. I generally like Chrono Cross. I think in terms of like RPG mechanics, I think obviously the audio-visual visuals of Chrono Cross are kind of peak PlayStation 1 32-bit era. It's beautiful. And it's fun to play. I like the level up mechanics. The battle system's super interesting. I'm surprised we've never seen anybody try to replicate it. But do I need to close those? But it's just wrapped around this bizarre narrative that just is nonsensical. I wrote another piece for Medium as well that had to do with the fact that Chrono Cross, I think that Chrono Cross kind of wasted Chrono Trigger's best gift, which was New Game Plus. I think one of the things that makes Chrono Trigger so interesting is you play it through the first time, and it's a great kind of casual Japanese RPG. It's not too complex, but it has enough depth, especially the way you can kind of mix and match your party and the dual text and triple text and all that kind of stuff. But once you get in there with a New Game Plus, it almost turns into like less of a JRPG and more of like not a visual novel, but an adventure game where it's more about kind of exploring the world and re-experiencing the story. But when you look at a game like Chrono Cross, like, to me, the story is the least engaging, the least well-developed part of that game. And the battle system and the mechanics and the RPG elements are the most interesting part of the game. And so on a New Game Plus playthrough of Chrono Cross, you're kind of like, you're stuck with a story that is kind of like ridiculous without getting the benefit of actually getting to enjoy the RPG mechanics. So it's kind of like, it's like literally the opposite of what Chrono Trigger does so well. You can find that on Medium, which I wrote late last year, I think, November. It's called Chrono Cross Wasted Chrono Trigger's Biggest Gift. If you Google that, you'll be able to find it. I did a New Game Plus playthrough of Chrono Cross last year, and again, it's beautiful. The music is obviously amazing, and I enjoyed it for that. But the story was kind of as nonsensical as I remembered. The Empire in Final Fantasy VI is essentially the National Socialist German Workers' Party. Okay, I don't really know too much about that, but I'm kind of curious now to dig into the history of that party and see the parallels with the Empire too. I think the Empire in Final Fantasy VI is one of the kind of most well-crafted villains in Japanese RPGs. You've seen lots of other games that kind of try to create something similar without having the same effect, like with them sort of falling into caricature. And I think Final Fantasy VI does a pretty good job of building a party, like an empire that's believable in its ambitions and believable in the way that it sort of operates, especially with the way, like, you have the emperor who you kind of associate with on a political level, but then Kafka is just kind of so far gone that regular politics are not effective with him. Ooh. All right, so we've come through sort of the icy main world below. We haven't met any of the people in there. Okay, the NSDAP was in charge of Germany in the 30s up to May of 1945. Well, that tells me pretty much everything I need to know. We're now up in the Kingdom of Zeal, which is, again, the magic-based kingdom. And this is where, the kind of well-off people live. And they live up in this world above the kind of frozen wasteland below, pretending that, that they're the only ones that exist, they're the only ones that matter. And they're ruled over by a queen named Queen Zeal. She has two children, Janice and Shala. Shala is very empathetic towards the earthbound people who live in the world below, and wants to use her kind of privilege and power to help better their lives, which is against what the queen believes, and her brother Janice is also not really too engaged with that. But we'll see more of that coming up. So here we're at the Queen's Palace. You can scratch this news back and learn a technique for scratching new backs, but and then go back down to one of the other cities and get a tab, a magic tab or a speed tab or something, but I'm not going to do that on this run through. Now right here is an important little bit of the game. I can talk to her, and you can see she has a little plant next to her. If I speak with her, she asked me if I like plants. The queen's told her to burn the sapling that the Guru of Life gave her, but what I'm going to do is tell her to secretly plant it. And by doing this, I open up a subquest later in the game that is one of the very few things you can be locked out of in Chrono Trigger. Most of the game you can, you have full access to. But there are a couple things here and there that you can be locked out of, and that's one of them. So this is the Mammon machine, which is cool looking. This is a beautiful room that's like the epitome of 16-bit JRPG kind of visual design. It's gorgeous. But what we really want to do is head on over this way, and this is where we're going to meet Shala for the first time. And meet Janice sort of for the first time. We're also privy to one of the best songs in the game as well. Chrono Trigger obviously has just a phenomenal soundtrack, and this is a standout track in my mind. So Shala and Janice are, brother and sister, and they're very close. Janice has sort of like, a dark personality, haunted by a lot of demons. Shala is older and kind of more kind of confident and secure in her power and her place and her understanding of how she can change the world, and she protects Janice a lot as well. Janice, of course, we find out he plays a much larger role in the game as an adult. Shala's always been one of my very favorite characters in gaming. She was kind of the first character in a game that I really became like attached to, and I've always considered her one of my just top 3 favorite characters. in gaming. She plays, she has she has a major role in the overall plot of Chrono Trigger. She doesn't have like a ton of screen time, however, but she kind of like the whole story sort of hinges around her. One thing that I discovered only just recently after having played this game for like 25 years is the icon on these doors, which you can see right here. We're trying to open it up. It's the Mammon machine. I never really realized that. So you can see this icon here matches this machine that I'm about to go show you. And I just, when it dawned on me just very recently that's what it was, I was kind of blown away. It seems so obvious to me now in hindsight. What we are doing here at the Mammon Machine is taking the pendant that used to belong to... I can change Marl into my party. What am I doing? It belongs to Marl. It's actually the pendant that Shala just gave to her little brother Janus, and it's pretty integral to a lot of the plot in the game. We've just powered it up with the energy of the Mammon Machine, so now we can open up these doors. At this point, we can also, if we want, go through a lot of the other maps, the other eras, and unlock a lot of the those special black locked chests. We can go get the Swallow, a sword for Chrono that's like probably the second best sword in the game. So you can get it quite early on if you know that you have access to it at this point. And it can, in a regular playthrough, it can make a huge difference in terms of your ability to do damage in battle and stuff. Most people probably don't start doing that until they are later in the game, when the game kind of encourages you to do more kind of running around the various world maps doing side quests in the second half of the game. So on a regular playthrough, you're actually meant to lose against this boss. The golem is quite difficult, but you can beat it. You can beat it on a first playthrough if you're really good. You can easily beat it on a New Game Plus playthrough. So in a regular playthrough, you're probably going to lose, and then you're going to get caught and captured. But when you beat it, Dalton just uses a spell to capture you. Why he can do this at this point in the game, but not later when you fight him as a boss character, who knows? JRPG logic, right? I really like this scene and this background because it shows off the transparency effects that the Super Nintendo does really well, which was really novel at the time, and it just looks cool. Just an impressive technical and artistic feat. So we're about to get sent back. Oh, no, never mind. Wrong part of the game. Yeah, so the prophet... Okay, yeah, no, I was right. Yeah, we're going to get... the prophet has arrived. So the prophet arrived kind of mysteriously and has been advising Queen Zeal, kind of to the chagrin of a lot of her other advisors. You'll notice that the little cat, Alphador, quite likes the prophet. But he is trying to kind of meddle with the politics and what's happening in Zeal at the time. And so he forces Shala to take Chrono and his party back to the time gate, toss him in it, and then lock it shut so that we can't come back to this era. Because the prophet has a very clear understanding of who Chrono and his party are and what their goals are, and so we get sent back to a different time period, and then it gets locked. And so we know that the guru is stuck up on Mount Woe in this time period and needs help, and Shala's asked us to help him, but we need to figure out how to get back here now that this time gate is locked up. But of course, we have options. And so the next step in the game, which is probably the last chunk that I'll do before I call it wraps on the stream, is we end up going to get ourselves a full-blown time machine in the future, which is pretty cool. It's called the Epoch, and it's just a cool airship. I really like flying it. It feels really good. It's uses just like the same world map, like in later Super Nintendo games and Japanese RPGs and stuff. They always like to use like Mode 7 maps or Mode 7 like airship travel and stuff. Like if you're thinking about stuff like Trials of Mana or Final Fantasy VI, but Chrono Trigger, bless its heart, doesn't. It uses its like really straightforward world map, and even when you're flying in an airship, and the Epoch just feels really good to move around in and fly in. Unfortunately, when we get it, it's going to be stationary, but it still takes us where we need to go, and you get to name it, which is fun. Okay, we're back at the end of time. This is where my party hangs out when they're not with me. Okay. Yep. So the Wings of Time. I'm afraid he became a tad psychotic, spending so much of his time doing research. As anyone who's been to university can attest, that's probably accurate. So, break the seal. That's the chapter we're on right now. We need to go to the future. I will, at some point, find the right pillar. It's going to be the last one I check, isn't it? Protodoll. Here we go. This is going to take me back to a location that I was at earlier where we found Robo for the first time. Yeah, this is good. So there's a few locked doors in the future here, and normally on a playthrough, if I was going to just be doing a regular playthrough, or even a non-streaming playthrough, I would probably take the time at this point to start going around and unlocking the different locked doors and boxes and stuff like that. You can get some really powerful equipment, but because I'm playing a maxed out party on a new game plus, like there's not much benefit, and I don't think that that's necessarily going to be the most interesting use of our time at this point. I might go do it later in a run, but I'd rather be able to get through that the next area where we at least get introduced to the Guru of Life and find out what we need to do. So this is an area that I never really played through as a kid. This short little dungeon area. The alternative is racing Johnny in the Mode 7 racing game, but I found out that it's actually quicker just to run through this area than to do the racing game. And so just one long single screen with a few battles, and it gets you through. This is, I think, the last time I have to kind of travel through here, because the next time we're in the future, we've got the fully flying airship. All right. There's Johnny. I believe was supposed to play a larger part in the game. I think data miners have kind of figured out that Johnny, that there was more to Johnny than we kind of saw in the game. So this place is kind of fun. It's a sewer. Sewer levels are usually the worst. This one is designed kind of in a clever way. It's kind of an unfolding like puzzle box. And I've always kind of liked this sewer, despite the fact that I generally dislike sewer levels. It's got these funny frogs. You have to solve a few like puzzles, and then there's one area where it gets really clever about using sound, which isn't something you see in the rest of the game, and it kind of makes you think. it makes you think about traversing through the world and the dungeon in a bit of a different way. Yeah, so here we are. So this is a place where there's a cat there, and kind of naturally on your first playthrough, you're gonna think like, oh, okay, like a cat, like you go check it out, or you can kick that can into the garbage can, you can run, you can step on the little piece of cheese and make a squishy sound. But kind of just like the fair early on, it's kind of playing with your expectations and experiences with Japanese RPGs, because if you do any of those things, monsters hear you and then come attack you. And it's the same thing with the save spot. Like naturally you're like, oh, a save spot, I gotta get on there and save or heal up or whatever. But it also makes a sound when you step on it, this jingle sound, and if you do that, the monsters pop out of the water. And I've always just thought that was kind of a cute little diversion, cute little way of designing a dungeon that emphasizes traversal and exploration and stuff. Here we go. As you could see, even I forgot for a second where I was supposed to go there. It's also a little bit of a maze. You can come here quite early in the game, and the enemies are actually quite easy. But there's a boss battle. There's no real point coming here early in the game, but you can. Here's the boss. As you can imagine, this boss battle is going to be quite simple. Sir Crawley is he's a guy. I don't really get who he is, but he seems to run some little monster crime syndicate, and then gets squashed. Just the fact that we're in the future and there's kind of sentient speaking monsters, is kind of something that makes you think about kind of the development of the world. Like I do like that there's sort of this subculture of fiends, I guess they're called in this world, and there's sort of a subplot that revolves around the idea that the fiends are just like, they're in the world and they're also trying to just claw and fight for their place in the world, kind of against the inexorable flow of humanity. Okay, we're almost done this dungeon. Then we'll pop into the area with the Guru of Life, and then that's going to be where I call it a day. I do these streams on my lunch break once a week. It's been a blast to kind of get to play through my favorite game, talk about it, experience it in a way that like I don't necessarily get to as I just play through it on my own on my Nintendo DS or whatever. And I've been really enjoying this, so I appreciate everybody who comes by for the stream or watches those VODs or just gets in touch with me online. So the pendant allows me to open up that door. We come here. There's these little like data drops that I can read, and Balthazar, the Guru of Reason. I called him the Guru of Life earlier. Guru of Reason. You find out that he lived in Zeal, the Kingdom of Zeal, the Magic Kingdom, until a great disaster there threw him through time, along with the other gurus. And we are going to find out what that disaster was and experience it as part of the game later on. The gurus I've always kind of been fascinated by. They're, these sort of magical people who are just like, invested in using their power to understand the world and save it. And I think I've always felt like they're kind of acting and working against the destructive nature of self-destructive nature of Queen Zeal, who sort of represents just like, power, absolute power corrupts absolutely. I always kind of felt like there was something that was kind of manipulating Queen Zeal, but over time I've kind of come to realize that no, I think like what she's kind of controlled by is just the corruption of the idea of maintaining and growing power for her and her family and her control over her kingdom. So this is pretty cool. Balthazar kind of transferred his memory into this new. These new creatures are like, I don't even know what they are. They're like, like you can transfer memory into them. So like are they computer based? They also exist way back in 65 million BC. They exist now. Does that mean it? And they existed and they lived in 12,000 BC as well. Does that mean that Balthazar just brought this one forward? Is it a fabricated one? Have they just lived, alongside humans for 65 million years? I don't know the answer to any of those questions, but I've always kind of felt like the new represented the idea that there's more going on, that there's, a deeper story, that there's just layers that Chrono Trigger just never even touches on. I'm going to take off. All right, so we've got our time machine, and we can travel to any of the time periods. If you go to 1999 AD, that's when Lavos arrives. You can fight the boss. We need to go back to 12,000 BC. And so what I'll do is we'll fly back to 12,000 BC with our new time machine, and then I'm gonna sign off. So thanks everybody for dropping by today. Thanks for watching one of my favorite kind of portions of the game. I like the Tyranno Lair. I like getting to go to 12,000 AD and then ending off by getting a time traveling airship is awesome, as Marl just said. It's a cool airship, and now we're kind of heading into, I guess, what I would consider sort of the beginning of the end of Act 2, where we're about to kind of witness like the game's big twist coming up after a couple of dungeons. Mount Woe, which you can see hanging there, like floating in the sky on that chain, is a cool dungeon and has one of the best boss battles in the game as well. So we'll pick up here. We'll check out Mount Woe next time around, and that'll be next Tuesday, around lunchtime Pacific. And I appreciate you stopping by today. Thanks so much for coming. If you enjoyed the stream, check out my newsletter, Astrolabe, aiden.substack.com. Head on over to YouTube, youtube.com/AidenMoher, for archived episodes of Let's Play Chrono Trigger, and also episodes of archived episodes of my other streaming series called Late to the Party, where I play old video games, usually for the first time, talk about them, talk about my experience, and then write about it in each issue of Astrolabe. Entirely free to sign up. I appreciate subscriptions here on Twitch. I appreciate follows on YouTube, subscriptions to Astrolabe. I'm on Twitter constantly as well, twitter.com/adribbleofink, ADRIBBLEOFINK. I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to watch all of the streams, some of the stream or the video on demand, and I can't wait to be back next week. Thanks so much. All right, have a good day.